Good evening, black people and all allies fighting for black liberation, black prosperity, and black joy. I'm Charles Blow, and welcome to Prime. While the president was pushing his Build Back Better plan in Pennsylvania today, Senate Republicans, for the third time this year, filibustered yet another Democrat-led voting rights bill. This one was even supported by Joe Manchin, who claimed he could get Republican support for it. He couldn't. Not one Republican voted for it, and although it's disappointing that a vote to begin debate on the Freedom to Vote Act was blocked by Republicans today, it is not at all a surprise. But according to Rolling Stone, the failure of the vote is part of a choreographed strategy by Democrats. The president was not yet able to respond to today's vote, but here's what VP Harris said earlier today.
We're not going to give up. We're not deterred, but there's still a lot of work to do, and I think it's really a sad day.
Earlier, I got a chance to sit down with President and Director Counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, Sherrilyn Ifill, to discuss the future of voting rights and whether Democrats are finally ready to nix the filibuster. Take a listen. Sherrilyn, thank you so much for joining us tonight. The Republicans in the Senate have once again, for the third time, filibustered the voting rights bill. What is your initial reaction to what has happened today?
You know, Charles, first of all, thanks for having me. Even though I am not at all surprised and we knew what would happen today, you know, it's still shameful. It's still shameful to see an entire party line up against measures that would expand voting access in a democracy. But I'm aware that this is part of a choreography that is going to play out again next week when the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act comes forward. But it's a testament, a reflection of where we are in this country politically and in terms of our democracy.
Let's talk a little bit about that choreography. You know, Rolling Stone and some other people think that this is all part of the master plan by the Democrats, right? You get Joe Manchin to sign on and co-sponsor the bill. He says he can deliver 10 Republican votes. Show him that he can't do that. Show him that no matter what he does, they will not go along with it. And then he will feel so much pressure that he will then say, I was against the filibuster, getting rid of the filibuster, but now I will get rid of it. Do you believe that this whole, kind of chess that they're playing around this issue is going to work in the end?
Well, it's funny, Charles. I've said failure is not an option, so it better work. My view is I don't care how long we turn around the floor and how long the choreography is, as long as when the music stops, everybody understands what has to happen. And what has to happen is that we have to have this voting legislation passed. We have to have both the Freedom to Vote Act and we have to have the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. So if this is the way to do it, if what Senator Manchin needs to see is that there are no roads to the Republicans, and I've been in meetings with Senator Manchin where we, civil rights leaders, asked him to bring some Republicans, and he delivered a number of Republicans to that meeting, not one of whom voted today in favor of the For the People Act, and we'll see what happens with the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. So honestly, if that's the choreography that it takes, I'm perfectly agnostic about that, so long as when we get to the end of the dance, we all understand what has to happen, which is that we have to have this voting legislation, we have to have both of these pieces of voting legislation, and we have to have them as soon as possible, frankly, if we're going to ensure that voters in our communities, in Black and Brown communities, have the ability to participate equally in the political process in 2022.
Do you believe that Joe Manchin and also Christian Sinema believe that that has to happen, understand that that has to happen, and are going to make sure that that happens by some means? Because Joe Manchin has so far said everything to the contrary, constantly saying that he is not open to getting rid of the filibuster. He left the door open a little bit to maybe tinkering with it a little bit, but that could be anything like a standing filibuster and still allow the filibuster to stand. Do you believe that they will, in the end, because that's the only option left now, in the end, will they alter the filibuster to allow this to pass with Democrats only?
Charles, I don't have any greater insight, certainly into the thinking of Senator Sinema, whom I have never met, although civil rights leaders have asked to meet with her. I have met Senator Manchin, but I don't have any insight that is deeper than the insight that anyone else has beyond his words and what he has said and what he has done. So I think it's all a waiting game. And it's actually, you're asking the question kind of relentlessly, Charles, and appropriately so, because it lifts up what I think reveals an incredible structural problem in our democracy, that, one senator elected by 290,000 West Virginians is able to dictate whether or not Black people are going to be able to fully participate in the political process through voting in 2022 and going forward. One would hope that he understands. He has expressed his desire to pass voting legislation. He did work on the Freedom to Vote Act. This is really his bill. So it's apparent that he thinks that voting is important, and he has said that. The question is, does he think a Senate rule, the filibuster, and the traditions associated with it, which have been very harmful to Black people, are more important than the constitutional right of Black people to participate in the political process? And that's how we put it to him. No Senate rule is more important than the Voting Rights Act, which is a statute enacted by the Senate, by the Congress, pursuant to the Congress's power under the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. And so, at the end of the day, an archaic Senate rule cannot take precedence over the right of minority voters to participate in the political process equally. I would think that Joe Manchin would know that. I would think that Kristen Sinema would know that. But I don't have any deeper insight into, once we get to the point where it's fish or cut bait, whether they're actually ready to fish.
Sherrilyn, shifting to another topic, states are already using census data to redraw districts, in many cases using kind of a racial gerrymandering approach, like the state of Texas, where 95% of the increase in the population that allowed them to get 2 new seats in the House of Representatives came from people of color. And yet, people of color are getting less of the voice in those districts, right? So the white majority districts went up, Hispanic majority districts went down, and now there are 0 Black majority districts in the state of Texas. Even if these bills pass, will it be too late for the 2022 election cycle for us to redraw those districts, or is that a lost cause and we have to wait until it's all over?
Well, it depends, Charles, on where we're talking about. So LDF, we filed suit last week in South Carolina, challenging their failure to begin the redistricting process. So you're right, some places have gone ahead and drawn maps that are discriminatory. Texas was going to draw discriminatory maps no matter what, as they have in every redistricting cycle since 1970. So we knew that was going to happen. But then there are some jurisdictions that are holding it up, so that in the hopes that it would seem that litigation would not be able to be completed in time for the 2022 election. So there are lots of different things happening in different places, all of them pretty problematic from our perspective. The Freedom to Vote Act would address the issue of gerrymandering, but you're right, if jurisdictions have already completed their process and it's gone through both houses, you can't retroactively apply the federal law, and then we have to go through the litigation process. Litigation has already been filed in Texas by MALDEF. Litigation has been filed in Illinois. As I just said, we filed litigation in South Carolina. We are closely monitoring, I think, your home state of Louisiana as well. And so it's going to be very, very busy over the next few months, whether this bill passes or not, on the redistricting front. But Charles, can I just say one other thing?
Shifting to the administration.
Charles, can
Absolutely.
I say one other thing? I want to make sure people also know that, redistricting is partly about Congress and about state houses, but we are actually also very engaged with local redistricting. It's city council districts, county council districts, judicial districts. This is power up and down the roster. And so I really want to encourage people to be attentive to the issue of redistricting. We've been holding training sessions every week in different states to get people up to speed on how they can be engaged. It's not just about Congress. It's every political body is going to be redistricted off of these numbers, and we need to be prepared to protect the Black vote and power.
Are you satisfied with the way the administration has engaged on this? It is clear that their first priority was the spending bills. The president has yet to fully engage on whether or not he would like to see the filibuster altered or completely changed. They have not leaned in with the full weight of the presidency and the White House on this issue, and maybe they're waiting until the spending bill passes or doesn't. Are you satisfied with their engagement so far?
Well, when I met with the president in July, I was very clear and direct, along with other civil rights leaders, that we needed to hear the president's voice, that we wanted to hear the president's voice on the filibuster. I do think we will. I do think that this process with Manchin has been a choreography that the White House has been willing to see play out. But next week, the question will be called, because we'll get the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act put to a vote as well. I suspect the vote will be the same as it was today on the Freedom to Vote Act. And then we are finally confronting the issue of the filibuster. And then it's fish or cut bait time. And at that point, the president has to fish. He has to use his power. He has to use the bully pulpit. He has to use whatever influence he has to convince Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema to address the filibuster, to be prepared to carve out something that will allow this voting legislation to move forward. Because at the end of the day, Charles, if it doesn't move forward, we are looking at really a fundamental weakening, if not beginning of the end of our democracy. If citizens cannot vote and participate equally in the political process, if these states continue to pass these voter suppression laws as they've done in Georgia and Texas and Florida, where LDF is litigating in all three places, if we continue to see these bills go forward, if we continue to see these bills applied that essentially at the end of the day will allow these new bodies that they've created to decide who wins the election. If we are allowing this, we are looking into the face of the end of democracy.
Sherrilyn Ifill, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Charles.